The brass cartridge rolled across the concrete floor with a metallic ping that seemed to echo forever in the abandoned warehouse. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen watched it settle against a chunk of rubble, knowing that sound represented one of only 2 rounds she had left. 50 enemy soldiers were advancing through the industrial district below, and somewhere in that maze of shipping containers and rusted machinery, her extraction team was pinned down and bleeding. The scope of her rifle caught the morning sun as she adjusted her position behind the makeshift barricade. 2 bullets. 50 targets. The mathematics of survival had never been so brutally simple. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The qualification range at Fort Davidson had always been Maya's sanctuary, a place where precision mattered more than politics, and where her steady hands spoke louder than the whispers that followed her through the barracks. At 26, she possessed the kind of natural marksmanship that instructors wrote about in training manuals, the ability to thread a needle at distances that made seasoned veterans shake their heads in disbelief. But natural talent, as Maya had learned over 6 years of military service, meant little when wrapped in the wrong packaging. The Army had a way of looking at her slight frame and quiet demeanor and seeing limitation rather than potential. While her male counterparts advanced to elite sniper schools and specialized reconnaissance units, Maya found herself assigned to support roles, backup positions, and what the brass euphemistically called auxiliary marksman duties. The morning briefing at Forward Operating Base Kestrel carried the familiar weight of bureaucratic routine mixed with underlying tension. Major Robert Harrison stood at the front of the converted shipping container that served as their command center, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays showing satellite imagery of the target area. The air inside was thick with the smell of instant coffee and the metallic tang of equipment oil. Maya sat in her usual position near the back, close enough to hear every detail but far enough away to avoid drawing attention to herself. Her assignment folder lay unopened in her lap, though she already knew what it would contain. Support Overwatch. Secondary position. Backup communications. The same language that had defined her career, keeping her close enough to the action to be useful but never close enough to be essential. The target was a chemical processing facility that had been converted into a weapons manufacturing site by insurgent forces. Intelligence indicated heavy fortification and at least 40 enemy combatants, possibly more. The primary assault team would approach from the east, while helicopter gunships provided air support from the south. Maya's role, inevitably, would be to provide long-range observation from a building complex 3 kilometers away. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, the team leader, spread a detailed map across the briefing table. The facility has multiple entry points, but satellite imagery shows they've concentrated their defenses around the main approaches. We'll have 12 minutes from initial breach to complete the mission before enemy reinforcements arrive from their regional stronghold. Maya studied the satellite images with the intensity she brought to everything related to tactical planning. The chemical facility sprawled across nearly 2 square kilometers, a maze of industrial buildings, storage tanks, and processing equipment. But what caught her attention were the sight lines and elevation advantages that the briefing materials seemed to overlook entirely. From her assigned Overwatch position, she would have limited visibility of the actual target areas. The industrial complex blocked direct line of sight to the primary objectives, making her role as a backup observer essentially meaningless. More concerning, the approach routes showed potential ambush points that weren't being addressed in the tactical plan. Sergeant First Class Kevin Murphy, a veteran of multiple deployments, raised his hand during the question period. "Major, what's our backup plan if the primary assault encounters heavier resistance than expected?" The helicopter support should be sufficient to handle any tactical complications. Major Harrison's response carried the confidence of someone who had never questioned whether his plans might be inadequate. Maya found herself raising her hand, a gesture that immediately drew attention from around the room. Some faces showed curiosity. Others displayed the barely concealed irritation of people whose time was being wasted by someone who should know better than to speak up. "Sir, the Overwatch position shown in the briefing materials has limited sight lines to the primary target areas." Maya's voice was steady and professional, but she could feel the familiar weight of skeptical attention settling on her shoulders. "There are several alternative positions that would provide better coverage of the assault routes and potential escape paths." The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of generators. Major Harrison's expression shifted from professional attention to polite dismissal. The look of someone who had learned to manage interruptions from subordinates who didn't understand their place in the hierarchy. Sergeant Chen, your assigned position provides adequate observation coverage for your support role. The primary tactical planning has been handled by personnel with the appropriate expertise and experience. Maya felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but this time, something deeper stirred in her chest. The tactical plan had gaps that could cost lives, and her expertise was being brushed aside because it came from someone the system had labeled as support personnel, rather than a tactical asset. Sir, with respect, I've studied this target area extensively during my preparation time. Maya continued, knowing she was stepping into dangerous territory but unable to remain silent when she could see problems that others were missing. The industrial complex has several elevated positions that would provide overlapping fields of fire and better coverage of potential enemy counterattack routes. That's enough, Sergeant Chen. Major Harrison's tone carried the finality of command authority. Your role in this operation is clearly defined. Focus on executing your assigned duties rather than redesigning tactical plans that have been developed by qualified personnel. The dismissal landed like a physical blow, made worse by the reaction it generated around the room. Some of the other soldiers looked uncomfortable with the abrupt shutdown, while others seemed to view it as a necessary correction of someone who had overstepped their boundaries. Maya felt her face flush with a mixture of embarrassment and frustration that she worked hard to keep from showing. Captain Rodriguez caught Maya's eye from across the room and gave a subtle nod that might have been acknowledgement or sympathy. Rodriguez had always been fair in her dealings with Maya, often seeking her input on technical matters during informal conversations. But even Rodriguez's support had limits within the formal structure of military hierarchy. As the briefing concluded and personnel began filing out to prepare their equipment, Maya remained seated for a moment longer than necessary. She had trained for situations exactly like this, spent countless hours studying urban warfare tactics and long-range marksmanship techniques. Her qualification scores consistently ranked in the top 5% of all military marksmen, regardless of gender or specialty designation. But none of that seemed to matter when measured against the institutional momentum that kept her in supporting roles, while others made the crucial decisions. The frustration was familiar, but it never became easier to bear. Each dismissal, each sidelining, each assignment to watch from the sidelines while others engaged in the primary mission felt like a small death of potential. Outside the briefing container, Fort Davidson hummed with pre-mission activity. Maya walked toward the armory, her boots crunching on the gravel path that connected the various operational buildings. The sun was beginning to climb higher, promising another scorching day in the desert, and the mountains that surrounded their base shimmered in the distance like a mirage. The armory sergeant, a grizzled veteran named Tom Bradley, looked up as she approached the equipment window. Chen, heard you're heading out on Overwatch duty again. Same old assignment package, I'm guessing? That's right, Sergeant Bradley. I need to check out my standard kit plus backup communication gear. Bradley's expression grew thoughtful as he pulled her equipment from the secure storage area. You know, I've been doing this job for 18 years, and I've seen a lot of marksmen come through this armory. Your qualification scores are some of the best I've ever processed. Maya signed for her equipment while considering how to respond to Bradley's observation. Scores don't seem to matter much when it comes to actual mission assignments. Bradley leaned across the counter, lowering his voice slightly. Between you and me, that Overwatch position they've got you assigned to is a waste of your skills. I've looked at those satellite images, and there are at least 3 better positions that would give you actual tactical value, instead of just keeping you busy. The validation felt both gratifying and frustrating. Maya appreciated Bradley's recognition of her capabilities, but it also highlighted how obvious the tactical shortcomings were to anyone with real expertise. The fact that her observations were being dismissed while support personnel could see the same problems suggested that the issue wasn't her analysis, but rather the source of that analysis. Any recommendations for equipment modifications, Sergeant Bradley? She asked, knowing that armory sergeants often had practical insights that formal briefings missed. Bradley pulled out a detailed equipment manifest and began highlighting specific items. I'd recommend taking extra batteries for your communication gear. That area has a history of signal interference, and you might find yourself relying on backup frequencies more than usual. Also, the weather forecast shows potential dust storms later in the day, so extra lens cleaning supplies would be smart. Maya nodded, making mental notes about the practical considerations that the formal briefing had glossed over. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Bradley's experience-based recommendations were exactly the kind of detailed preparation that could make the difference between mission success and failure. Yet this information wasn't being incorporated into the official planning process. As Bradley prepared her equipment bundle, he continued sharing insights that had been gathered through years of supporting operations in this region. The industrial facility they're targeting has been used by multiple groups over the past 2 years. Previous reconnaissance reports indicate they've made significant modifications to the defensive structures, but I'm not sure how much of that intelligence has been incorporated into current planning. The gap between institutional knowledge and operational planning was becoming more apparent with each conversation. Maya thanked Bradley for the equipment and the informal briefing, then headed toward the motor pool to check on transportation arrangements for the mission. The desert landscape outside the base stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by rocky outcroppings and the occasional cluster of scrub vegetation. Maya had spent months studying this terrain, learning to read the subtle variations in elevation and shadow that could provide tactical advantages or conceal potential threats. The knowledge felt wasted when applied to passive observation duties, but she had learned to find satisfaction in thorough preparation even when that preparation seemed undervalued. Specialist Jennifer Walsh was conducting final checks on the vehicles that would transport the various elements to their positions. Walsh was one of the few people at the base who consistently treated Maya with the respect accorded to technical expertise rather than the patronizing courtesy often reserved for support personnel. "Chen, you're riding in Vehicle 3 to the Overwatch position." Walsh consulted her clipboard while speaking, but her tone carried genuine professional interest. "I've been looking at the route planning for your drop-off point. The terrain is rougher than the maps indicate, and there are several alternative paths that might provide better concealment during insertion." Maya appreciated Walsh's attention to operational details that others overlooked. "Have you shared these observations with the transportation coordinator?" Walsh's expression suggested frustration with formal communication channels. "I mentioned it during the logistics briefing, but the response was that the planned routes were adequate for support element positioning." The pattern was becoming depressingly familiar. Practical expertise was being dismissed when it came from personnel who weren't part of the primary decision-making structure. Maya made a mental note to study Walsh's alternative route suggestions, knowing that such local knowledge could prove valuable if circumstances required improvisation during the mission. As the afternoon wore on, Maya completed her personal equipment checks with the methodical precision that characterized all of her professional activities. Her rifle was a precision instrument that she had modified and calibrated to specifications that exceeded military standards. Every component had been tested and retested until she could predict its performance under any environmental condition. The scope alignment was perfect, the trigger pull consistent to within fractions of an ounce, and the ammunition selection optimized for the distances and conditions expected during the mission. Her backup equipment included communication gear, emergency medical supplies, and navigation tools that would allow her to operate independently if circumstances required it. But despite her thorough preparation and technical competence, Maya knew that her role in the upcoming operation would be limited to passive observation, unless something went dramatically wrong with the primary tactical plan. The frustration of being prepared for more responsibility than she would be allowed to exercise had become a constant companion throughout her military career. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams found Maya in the communications center reviewing frequency allocations and backup protocols. Williams was one of the few senior non-commissioned officers who had consistently supported Maya's professional development, often providing informal mentoring and advice about navigating military bureaucracy. "Chen, I heard about what happened during the briefing this morning." Williams settled into a chair beside Maya's workstation, her voice carrying the tone of someone who had experienced similar frustrations. "You were right about the tactical concerns you raised, but timing and context matter when it comes to challenging established plans." Maya looked up from the communication protocols she had been studying. "I couldn't just sit there knowing that the Overwatch position provides inadequate coverage of the primary objectives. If something goes wrong, people could die, because critical information isn't being communicated effectively." Williams nodded with the understanding that came from years of experience with military hierarchy and its limitations. "I respect that, and your technical analysis was spot on, but you've got to pick your battles carefully, especially when you're trying to establish credibility within a system that doesn't always recognize expertise when it comes in unexpected packages." The conversation that followed touched on the broader challenges that Maya had faced throughout her career, the subtle and not-so-subtle ways that her contributions were minimized or dismissed, and the strategic approaches that might help her gain the recognition and responsibility that her skills warranted. Williams shared stories of her own career progression, including the setbacks and breakthroughs that had eventually led to her current position. But even Williams, with her experience and institutional knowledge, acknowledged the limitations that Maya faced. The military was changing, slowly and sometimes reluctantly, but change was happening. The key was finding ways to demonstrate value and competence that couldn't be ignored, even by people who were predisposed to overlook contributions from unexpected sources. As evening approached and the mission preparation entered its final phases, Maya found herself reflecting on the conversation with Williams and the broader patterns that had shaped her military experience. She had joined the service with clear goals and high expectations, believing that competence and dedication would be sufficient to earn the opportunities she sought. The reality had been more complex and often more frustrating than she had anticipated, but she had also discovered reserves of patience and determination that she hadn't known she possessed. The ability to maintain professional standards and personal integrity, even when external recognition was limited or absent entirely. The final briefing took place at 1,800 hours in the same converted shipping container where the morning session had occurred. The tactical displays now showed real-time intelligence updates and weather forecasts that would affect the timing and approach of the operation. Maya took her usual position near the back, her equipment bag packed and ready beside her chair. Major Harrison reviewed the final operational parameters with the practiced efficiency of someone who had conducted similar briefings dozens of times. The assault would commence at 0530 hours, with preliminary reconnaissance beginning 2 hours earlier. Maya's insertion time was set for 0400 hours, giving her sufficient time to reach her overwatch position and establish communications before the primary operation began. The weather forecast indicated clear skies with moderate wind conditions ideal for both helicopter operations and long-range observation. Intelligence updates suggested that enemy force strength remained consistent with earlier estimates, though there were indications of increased activity around the target facility during the previous 48 hours. As the briefing concluded, Captain Rodriguez approached Maya with final coordination details. "Chen, I want you to know that your overwatch position is important to the overall success of this mission. We're counting on you to provide accurate situation reports and maintain communication links if primary systems experience difficulties." Maya nodded respectfully, appreciating Rodriguez's attempt to emphasize the value of her role even within its limited parameters. "Ma'am, I'll maintain continuous observation of the assigned sectors and provide detailed reports on any activities that might affect the primary operation." The exchange was professional and courteous, but Maya could sense the underlying tension between Rodriguez's desire to utilize Maya's capabilities fully and the constraints imposed by the established tactical plan. Rodriguez was working within the same institutional limitations that affected everyone in the command structure, balancing individual expertise against broader organizational requirements. As the personnel dispersed to make final preparations, Maya walked back to her quarters to review her personal notes and conduct one last equipment check. The night air was cool and clear, filled with the sounds of ongoing base operations and the distant hum of aircraft conducting routine patrols. Her quarters were sparse but organized, with technical manuals stacked neatly on a small desk and personal items arranged with military precision. Maya had learned to find comfort in order and routine, creating private spaces where she could maintain control, even when external circumstances were unpredictable. She spread her tactical maps across the desk and began reviewing the terrain features and sight lines that would define her mission parameters. The overwatch position was indeed inadequate for comprehensive observation of the primary target areas, just as she had indicated during the morning briefing, but the alternative position she had identified offered significantly better coverage and tactical value. The decision-making process was complex, involving professional obligations, personal integrity, and the practical realities of military hierarchy. Maya had been assigned specific duties and geographic boundaries, but she had also sworn an oath to support and defend objectives that might require flexibility and initiative beyond the scope of formal orders. As she studied the maps and considered her options, Maya felt the familiar weight of responsibility that accompanied every significant decision in her military career. The choice between strict adherence to assigned parameters and adaptive response to evolving tactical situations was one that every professional soldier faced, but the consequences varied dramatically depending on rank, position, and institutional support. Her preparation was thorough and methodical, covering every contingency that she could anticipate, and several that seemed unlikely but possible. The rifle was cleaned and calibrated, the communication equipment tested and configured, and the navigation tools programmed with primary and alternate routes to and from the Overwatch position. But more importantly, Maya had prepared herself mentally for the possibility that the mission might develop in ways that challenged the assumptions underlying the tactical plan. Her training and experience had taught her to expect the unexpected, to remain flexible and responsive when circumstances exceeded the scope of standard operating procedures. The night passed slowly, filled with the restless energy that preceded significant operations. Maya reviewed her notes, checked her equipment repeatedly, and tried to quiet the internal voice that questioned whether her skills and knowledge would be utilized effectively during the coming mission. At 0300 hours, she made her way to the motor pool, where Specialist Walsh was conducting final checks on the vehicles. The desert night was cold and clear, with stars visible in brilliant profusion across the vast sky. The air smelled of diesel fuel and dust, familiar scents that had become associated with operational readiness and the anticipation of action. Walsh looked up as Maya approached, her expression reflecting the focused intensity that characterized pre-mission preparations. "Chen, Vehicle 3 is ready for your transport to the insertion point. I've loaded extra water and communication batteries based on my review of the terrain and weather conditions." Maya thanked Walsh for the thoughtful additions to her equipment loadout, recognizing the professionalism and attention to detail that Walsh brought to her responsibilities. The gesture was small but significant, representing the kind of mutual support and respect that existed among competent personnel, regardless of formal hierarchy or assigned roles. As the convoy prepared to depart, Maya settled into the passenger seat of Vehicle 3 and reviewed her mission parameters one final time. The Overwatch position was clearly marked on her maps, along with the communication schedules and reporting requirements that would define her role during the operation. But she had also noted the alternative positions and tactical options that might become relevant if circumstances required adaptive response beyond the scope of her original assignment. The knowledge was there, carefully researched and thoroughly understood, ready to be applied if the situation demanded it. The vehicle convoy departed Fort Davidson at exactly 0330 hours, beginning the hour-long journey through desert terrain to the insertion points where each element would begin their approach to the target area. Maya watched the landscape pass through the vehicle windows, noting terrain features and landmarks that might become important if extraction routes or alternative positions became necessary. The industrial facility that was their target remained invisible in the darkness ahead, but Maya had studied it so thoroughly that she could visualize its layout and defensive positions with remarkable clarity. The tactical challenges and opportunities were clear in her mind, along with the limitations imposed by her assigned role and position. As the convoy approached the insertion area, Maya felt the familiar surge of focused energy that accompanied the transition from preparation to execution. Whatever constraints had been placed on her mission parameters, she would carry out her duties with the same precision and professionalism that characterized all of her military service. The Overwatch position awaited, along with whatever challenges and opportunities the mission would present. Maya was ready for all of them, prepared to contribute within her assigned role while remaining flexible enough to adapt if circumstances required more than passive observation and routine communication. The first phase of her military career had been defined by limitations and overlooked potential, but this mission felt different somehow. The preparation had been more thorough, the stakes were higher, and her understanding of the tactical situation was more comprehensive than ever before. As Vehicle 3 approached her insertion point, Maya made a final mental inventory of her equipment, knowledge, and resolve. She had trained for this moment throughout her career, developing skills and expertise that extended far beyond the boundaries of her official assignment. The question now was whether that preparation would be needed, and whether she would have the courage to use it if the mission demanded more than anyone expected. The vehicle slowed to a stop in the darkness, and Maya gathered her equipment for the final approach to her Overwatch position. The target area lay ahead, shrouded in darkness and uncertainty, but she was ready for whatever challenges awaited in the industrial maze that would soon become a battlefield. The insertion point was a dried riverbed that cut through the desert landscape like a scar, its banks providing natural concealment from observation by enemy forces stationed around the chemical facility. Maya shouldered her equipment pack and checked her watch as Vehicle 3 disappeared back into the darkness, leaving her alone in the vast silence of the pre-dawn desert. The Overwatch position lay 2 kilometers ahead through terrain that the satellite images had marked as moderately difficult but passable. Maya began her approach with the methodical pace that her training had ingrained, moving through shadows and using natural cover to minimize her visibility profile. The desert was deceptively quiet, but her experienced ear picked up the subtle sounds that indicated life and activity in what appeared to be empty landscape. As she climbed the rocky slopes toward her assigned position, Maya found herself thinking about the tactical shortcomings she had identified during her mission preparation. The Overwatch site would provide limited visibility of the primary target areas, making her role largely ceremonial rather than tactically significant. But the alternative position she had studied offered dramatically better coverage and strategic value. The question that had been nagging at her throughout the night was whether professional obligation required strict adherence to assigned parameters or adaptive response to tactical realities. Military doctrine emphasized both following orders and accomplishing the mission, but sometimes those requirements existed in tension with each other. The assigned Overwatch position proved to be exactly as inadequate as Maya had predicted. From the rocky outcropping marked on her maps, she could see portions of the chemical facility's perimeter, but the primary target buildings were obscured by storage tanks and processing equipment. Her view of the planned assault routes was fragmentary at best, making detailed reconnaissance reports essentially impossible. Maya set up her equipment according to protocol, establishing communication links with the command center and conducting the required check-in procedures. Her rifle was positioned for optimal stability and sight alignment, though the tactical value of her position remained questionable. The communication equipment functioned perfectly, providing clear channels to both primary and backup frequencies. Command, this is Overwatch 1. Position established. Communication systems operational. Beginning surveillance of assigned sectors. The response came immediately, confirming that her transmission was received clearly and that the operation timeline remained on schedule. Roger. Overwatch 1. Maintain continuous observation and report any unusual activity in your surveillance area. Primary operation commences in 90 minutes. As Maya settled into her position and began systematic observation of the limited area visible from her location, she couldn't shake the feeling that her capabilities were being fundamentally wasted. She had trained for years to develop the skills necessary for precision marksmanship and tactical reconnaissance, but those skills were being applied to a role that could have been filled adequately by someone with minimal specialized training. The first hour of surveillance yielded routine observations of perimeter guards and normal facility operations. The enemy forces appeared to be following standard security protocols, with rotating patrols and fixed observation posts positioned at regular intervals around the chemical plant. Maya documented their patterns and timing, though she wondered whether anyone would actually review her detailed reports. Around 0500 hours, her radio crackled with preliminary coordination traffic as the assault elements moved into position for the primary attack. Maya listened carefully to the communication patterns, noting the professional efficiency of the team leaders and the confidence in their voices as they reported successful movement to their staging areas. But she also noticed something that concerned her. The assault teams were reporting clear approaches and minimal enemy activity along their planned routes, observations that didn't match what Maya could see from her elevated position. Through her scope, she observed significantly more enemy movement than the ground teams were detecting, including what appeared to be prepared defensive positions that hadn't been identified in the intelligence briefings. The discrepancy troubled her, but her assigned role was passive observation rather than tactical coordination. She made detailed notes of the enemy activity she could observe, planning to include the information in her post-mission reports, even though it might not affect the immediate tactical situation. As dawn approached, the quality of light improved enough for Maya to conduct more detailed surveillance of the facility. What she saw made her stomach tighten with apprehension. The chemical plant showed clear evidence of much heavier fortification than intelligence estimates had suggested. Guard positions were more numerous and better concealed than expected, and there were indications of prepared ambush sites along the assault routes. More concerning, Maya could see movement patterns that suggested enemy forces were aware of the approaching attack and were positioning themselves for defensive operations. The facility wasn't operating under normal security procedures, but rather appeared to be preparing for imminent combat. Maya keyed her radio with growing urgency. "Command, this is Overwatch 1. I'm observing significantly increased enemy activity around the target facility. Guard strength appears higher than intelligence estimates, and movement patterns suggest they may be aware of our approach." The response was immediate, but dismissive. "Overwatch 1, maintain your assigned observation sectors. Tactical assessment is being handled by qualified personnel in direct contact with target areas." The familiar frustration of being dismissed settled over Maya like a heavy blanket, but this time the stakes were higher than her personal career concerns. She was observing tactical intelligence that could affect the safety of her fellow soldiers, and that information was being ignored because it came from someone assigned to a support role. Maya continued her systematic observation, documenting enemy positions and movements with increasing concern about the safety of the assault teams. The chemical facility was clearly prepared for the attack, with defensive positions that would create interlocking fields of fire and multiple fallback positions for the enemy forces. At 0530 hours, the assault began with coordinated movement from multiple directions. Maya watched through her scope as the primary teams advanced toward their objectives, moving with the confidence that came from believing they held tactical surprise. But from her elevated position, she could see enemy forces maneuvering into ambush positions that would catch the assault teams completely exposed. The first contact came exactly as Maya had feared. Automatic weapons fire erupted from concealed positions along the eastern approach route, catching the lead assault team in a devastating crossfire. Radio traffic immediately shifted from routine coordination to urgent combat reports as the tactical situation deteriorated rapidly. Contact. Contact. Alpha Team, taking heavy fire from prepared positions. We're pinned down and need immediate support. The professional calm of the communication network shattered as teams tried to report their situations while maneuvering under fire. Maya watched the developing battle with growing alarm, her scope revealing the full extent of the ambush that had been prepared for the assault force. Enemy positions were coordinated and mutually supporting, creating a kill zone that trapped the primary assault elements without adequate cover or concealment. "Command, this is Overwatch 1. I have clear observation of the contact area and can provide tactical guidance on enemy positions." Maya's transmission was urgent but professional, offering assistance that could help coordinate effective response to the ambush. "Overwatch 1, maintain your assigned position and continue routine surveillance. Tactical coordination is being handled through appropriate channels." The dismissal felt like a physical blow, especially as Maya watched American soldiers fighting for their lives against an enemy that had clearly anticipated their attack. Her position provided a comprehensive view of the battlefield that no one else possessed, but that tactical advantage was being ignored because she wasn't authorized to provide combat coordination. The situation continued to deteriorate as enemy forces executed a well-planned defense that systematically isolated and suppressed the assault teams. Maya could see reinforcement routes and escape paths that weren't visible to the ground elements, information that could make the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Her radio crackled with increasingly desperate transmissions from the assault teams. "Bravo team is cut off and taking casualties. We need immediate extraction support or alternate routing guidance. Command, we're effectively surrounded and running low on ammunition." Maya made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. She switched to an emergency frequency rarely used except in the most desperate circumstances and began transmitting tactical information based on her superior observation position. Any element, this is Overwatch 1 on emergency frequency. I have comprehensive observation of the engagement area and can provide tactical guidance for movement and fire support." The response came from an unexpected source. "Overwatch 1, this is Viper Lead. We're in Apache flight holding above your position, but visibility is limited by smoke and terrain masking. Can you provide target information and friendly positions?" Maya's heart rate spiked as she realized she was about to exceed her authority in the most dramatic way possible, but the sounds of combat below left no room for hesitation. Lives were at stake, and her tactical knowledge was the only resource available to help coordinate effective response to the enemy ambush. Viper Lead, Overwatch 1. I can see multiple enemy positions and current friendly locations. Stand by for detailed tactical brief. Maya pulled out her terrain maps, and began calculating firing solutions and approach routes with a precision that years of training had made instinctive. The mathematics were complex, requiring rapid calculations of distance, elevation, wind effects, and movement patterns. But Maya had always excelled at spatial reasoning and tactical geometry. Her mind processed the variables with practiced efficiency, while her hands worked the radio controls and scope adjustments. Viper-led, enemy forces are concentrated in 3 primary defensive complexes. First position is approximately 200 meters northeast of the main processing building, elevation advantage over friendly positions. Second complex is integrated with the chemical storage area, providing both concealment and protective positioning. Roger. Overwatch 1. We need precise coordinates and friendly positions before we can engage. Walk us through the tactical picture, as you see it. Maya began providing detailed battlefield coordination, describing enemy positions, friendly unit locations, and safe approach routes for the helicopter gunships. Her elevated position allowed her to see the entire engagement area clearly, making her the critical link between the various elements struggling to coordinate their response to the ambush. The first rocket strike hit with devastating accuracy, guided by Maya's precise coordinate information. She watched through her scope as the enemy position erupted in smoke and debris, immediately reducing the pressure on the pinned assault teams. The coordinated defense began to crack as key positions were systematically destroyed. Excellent work, Overwatch 1. Target destroyed. Set us up for the next engagement. Maya continued to provide tactical coordination as the Apache helicopters systematically attacked the enemy positions she identified. Her radio work was precise and professional, but internally she was processing the magnitude of what she was doing. She had stepped completely outside her assigned role, taking on responsibilities that could result in court-martial proceedings. But the tactical situation was improving dramatically. The ground teams were able to break contact with the ambush positions and begin maneuvering toward their primary objectives. Enemy forces were retreating from prepared positions under accurate aerial attack guided by Maya's reconnaissance. As the immediate crisis passed and the assault teams regained tactical initiative, Maya realized that her unauthorized coordination had fundamentally changed the course of the operation. The mission was transitioning from potential disaster to successful completion, but now she would have to face the consequences of her decision to exceed authority. The facility assault proceeded with renewed momentum as the enemy defensive positions were neutralized. Maya continued to provide overwatch and tactical coordination, her position proving invaluable for managing the complex urban combat environment. The chemical processing areas were secured systematically, with minimal additional casualties among the assault forces. Alpha Team Leader's voice came through the radio with evident relief. Command. Primary objectives have been secured. Facility is under friendly control, and we're beginning exploitation of intelligence materials. Request guidance on extraction procedures. Maya smiled grimly as she listened to the successful completion reports. Her unauthorized tactical coordination had helped transform a failing mission into a complete success, but she knew that the military justice system would focus on her violation of orders rather than the positive outcomes. As the tactical situation stabilized and extraction procedures began, Maya started preparing for the inevitable reckoning. Her radio logs would show exactly what she had done, and there would be no way to deny that she had deliberately exceeded her assigned authority to coordinate combat operations. The helicopter extraction arrived exactly on schedule, collecting the assault teams and their intelligence materials from the secured facility. Maya remained at her overwatch position, continuing to provide security surveillance until all friendly forces had been extracted from the target area. Command, this is Overwatch 1. All friendly elements have cleared the target area. Facility is secure and ready for follow-on operations. Request permission to begin movement to extraction point. Roger. Overwatch 1. Maintain position for 1 hour to ensure area security, then proceed to extraction point for pickup. The hour of waiting gave Maya time to reflect on the events of the morning and their likely consequences for her military career. She had proven her tactical competence under the most demanding circumstances, but she had also violated fundamental principles of military authority and chain of command. The radio crackled with post-mission coordination traffic as various elements reported their status and began movement back to base. The operation had been successful beyond all expectations, with primary objectives achieved and minimal friendly casualties. But Maya knew that her role in that success would be viewed through the lens of military discipline rather than tactical effectiveness. As she prepared to leave her overwatch position, Maya took one final look at the chemical facility through her scope. Smoke was still rising from several of the enemy positions that had been destroyed during the engagement, and American flags were visible on the buildings that had been secured by the assault teams. The sight filled her with a complex mixture of pride and apprehension. She had contributed directly to mission success and the safety of her fellow soldiers, but she had done so by deliberately violating the orders and authority structures that defined military operations. The consequences of that choice would soon become clear. Maya began her movement back to the extraction point with the same methodical care that characterized all of her professional activities. The terrain was familiar now, and she moved efficiently through the rocky landscape while maintaining security awareness and radio contact with coordination elements. The extraction helicopters waiting at the designated pickup point, its rotors already spinning as Maya approached with her equipment. The crew chief helped her secure her gear and settle into the web seating as the aircraft lifted off for the return flight to Fort Davidson. During the flight, Maya found herself sitting across from several members of the assault teams who had participated in the morning's operation. Their conversations were animated discussions of the tactical challenges they had faced and the air support that had been critical to their success. "That voice on the emergency frequency saved our asses," one of the soldiers commented to his teammate. Whoever was providing that tactical coordination had perfect observation of the entire battlefield. "Best fire support guidance I've ever heard." Maya listened to the praise with mixed emotions, knowing that the unauthorized coordination had indeed been crucial to mission success, but also understanding that her violation of procedures would overshadow any positive outcomes in the formal evaluation process. The helicopter landed at Fort Davidson exactly on schedule, and Maya went through the standard post-mission procedures without incident. Equipment turn-in was routine, medical evaluation revealed no significant injuries, and preliminary debriefing focused on her assigned observation duties rather than the tactical coordination she had provided. But Maya knew that the real investigation would begin once communication logs were analyzed and someone discovered the emergency frequency traffic. The evidence of her unauthorized activities was clear and undeniable, documented in electronic records that would be reviewed by investigating officers. 2 days later, the formal summons arrived as Maya had expected. She was required to appear at a disciplinary hearing with specific charges related to exceeding assigned authority and conducting unauthorized tactical coordination. The potential consequences were serious, ranging from formal reprimand to court-martial proceedings. Maya read the notification carefully, noting the specific violations cited and the legal framework that would govern the hearing process. Military justice operated according to strict procedural requirements, and she would need to prepare her defense carefully, despite knowing that she had clearly violated her assigned parameters. Staff Sergeant Williams found her in the communications center, where Maya had been reviewing technical manuals with unusual intensity. "Chan, you need to think about how you're going to handle this hearing. The charges they're bringing could end your military career." Maya looked up from the frequency allocation chart she had been studying. "I understand the seriousness of the situation. I also understand that my actions probably saved American lives during that operation. That's not necessarily going to matter to the hearing officers. Military discipline requires following orders, even when individual judgment suggests different actions." Williams settled into a chair beside Maya's workstation, her expression reflecting years of experience with military bureaucracy and its limitations. The conversation that followed covered the legal and practical aspects of Maya's situation, including the precedents that might apply to her case and the strategic considerations that would affect how she presented her defense. Williams shared insights about the hearing process and the factors that typically influenced outcomes in disciplinary proceedings. But even Williams, with her extensive experience and institutional knowledge, acknowledged the complexity of Maya's situation. Her actions had clearly exceeded assigned authority, but they had also demonstrated exceptional competence and had contributed directly to mission success and soldier safety. Over the following days, Maya prepared for the hearing by reviewing every regulation and precedent that might apply to her circumstances. She studied cases involving battlefield initiative, emergency authority, and the legal frameworks that governed military operations during combat situations. The research was thorough and educational, but it didn't change the fundamental facts of her case. She had deliberately exceeded her assigned authority to provide tactical coordination, and that violation would be the primary focus of the disciplinary proceedings regardless of the positive outcomes. Captain Rodriguez visited Maya's quarters the night before the hearing, with a folder of documents and a concerned expression. Chen, I've been reviewing the operation reports and communication logs from the mission. Your tactical coordination was exceptional, but it also raises complex questions about command authority and battlefield initiative. Maya invited Rodriguez inside, recognizing that the captain's visit represented either support or additional scrutiny of her actions. Rodriguez had always been fair and professional in her dealings with Maya, though her authority was constrained by the same institutional structures that affected everyone in the command hierarchy. The chemical facility operation would have failed without your intervention. Rodriguez spread the documents across Maya's small desk, revealing detailed analysis of the tactical situation and the coordination that had enabled mission success. Your observation position provided critical battlefield intelligence that no one else possessed. That doesn't excuse my violation of assigned parameters, Maya replied, though she appreciated Rodriguez's recognition of her contributions to mission's success. Maybe not, but it does highlight significant problems with our tactical planning and authority structures. Your expertise was available and could have been utilized properly if our procedures were more flexible and adaptive. Rodriguez's documents included technical analysis of the communication systems, tactical timelines, and the sequence of events that had led to Maya's unauthorized coordination. The materials painted a picture of institutional rigidity that had nearly resulted in mission failure and unnecessary casualties. Will this analysis be part of the official record for the hearing? Maya asked, studying the detailed documentation that Rodriguez had prepared. If you want it to be. I can submit it as context for your actions, though it won't change the basic charges you're facing. It might influence how the hearing officers evaluate your decision-making process. Maya considered the implications carefully. Including Rodriguez's analysis might provide context for her actions, but it would also highlight the systemic problems that had made her unauthorized coordination necessary. The decision could affect not only her own career, but also the institutional changes that might result from her case. Submit it, Maya decided finally. If I'm going to face consequences for exceeding my authority, I want the complete tactical picture to be available for review. As Rodriguez prepared to leave, she offered one final observation. Chen, I've served with a lot of soldiers over the years, and most of them follow orders without questioning whether those orders serve the mission effectively. You're one of the few people I've met who was willing to risk personal consequences to ensure mission success and protect fellow soldiers. The hearing was scheduled for 09:00 hours the following morning. Maya spent the remaining time reviewing her statement and organizing her thoughts about how to present her actions within the framework of military justice. Whatever happened, she would face the consequences with the same integrity and professionalism that had guided her throughout her military career. The night passed slowly, filled with reflection on the decisions that had brought her to this point, and speculation about how those decisions would be evaluated by the hearing officers. Maya had chosen to act according to her professional judgment rather than her assigned limitations, and that choice would now be measured against the requirements of military discipline and institutional authority. As dawn approached, Maya prepared her dress uniform and reviewed her notes one final time. The hearing would determine not only her personal future, but also whether the military system could accommodate the kind of adaptive leadership that modern combat operations increasingly required. The stakes were higher than her individual career concerns. The precedent established by her case could affect how future situations involving battlefield initiative and emergency authority would be handled. Maya understood that her actions might influence military doctrine and procedures in ways that extended far beyond her personal circumstances. She had proven her tactical competence and professional judgment under the most demanding conditions, but now that competence would be evaluated within the institutional frameworks that governed military authority and discipline. The question was whether the system could balance the requirements of command structure against the practical necessities of effective combat leadership. The disciplinary hearing convened in a sterile conference room within the base's administrative complex, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across regulation furniture that had witnessed countless military careers hanging in the balance. Maya sat at the designated table wearing her dress uniform, every ribbon and insignia positioned with precision that reflected her commitment to military standards, even as those same standards prepared to judge her harshly. Colonel David Thompson presided over the proceedings with the measured authority of an officer who had spent decades navigating the intersection of military justice and operational necessity. His weathered face revealed nothing about his personal opinions as he reviewed the case file with methodical attention to detail. Major Harrison occupied the prosecutor's position, his expression carrying the weight of institutional responsibility and personal disappointment. The charges were read with formal precision that stripped away any ambiguity about Maya's situation. Violation of assigned parameters. Unauthorized tactical coordination. Exceeding command authority during combat operations. Each specification was documented with electronic evidence that made denial impossible and mitigation challenging. Staff Sergeant Chen, you understand the nature of these charges and the potential consequences of the actions described in the formal complaint? Colonel Thompson's voice carried the neutral tone required by military justice procedures, though Maya detected underlying tension that suggested personal conflict about the case. Yes, sir, I understand both the charges and the evidence supporting them. Maya's response was clear and direct, establishing from the beginning that she would not attempt to deny or minimize her actions during the chemical facility operation. You acknowledge that you deliberately exceeded your assigned authority when you provided tactical coordination to military aircraft during the engagement. The question was routine, but Maya understood that her answer would establish the foundation for everything that followed. Yes, sir. I provided tactical coordination because I believed the combat situation required immediate action to prevent casualties among friendly forces. My assigned observation position gave me comprehensive visibility of the engagement area that no other element possessed. Major Harrison leaned forward with the intensity of a prosecutor who believed deeply in the importance of military discipline. Staff Sergeant Chen, you received specific briefing instructions that limited your role to passive observation and routine communication. Those parameters were clearly defined and left no room for individual interpretation. That's correct, sir. My assigned role was support observation with no authorization for tactical coordination. Maya felt the familiar weight of institutional pressure, but this time she was prepared to articulate her reasoning rather than simply accepting dismissal. Yet you chose to ignore those instructions and assume tactical responsibilities that belonged to qualified personnel operating through proper command channels. Major Harrison's tone suggested that the case was straightforward and that Maya's guilt was both obvious and inexcusable. Sir, the proper command channels had failed due to communication breakdowns and tactical surprise. The assault teams were trapped in a coordinated ambush, and air support elements were operating without battlefield intelligence. Maya paused, choosing her words carefully to convey the urgency of the situation without appearing to excuse her violations. Colonel Thompson raised his hand to pause the exchange, studying Maya with an expression that suggested he was evaluating both her words and the broader implications of her case. Staff Sergeant Chen, walk this hearing through your decision-making process during the engagement. What specifically led you to believe that unauthorized action was justified? Maya had anticipated this question and prepared her response carefully, knowing that her explanation would either justify her actions or confirm her guilt in the eyes of the hearing officers. Sir, I monitored the tactical situation as it developed from my overwatch position. The assault teams encountered prepared defensive positions that hadn't been identified in intelligence briefings. Continue. Colonel Thompson's encouragement suggested genuine interest in understanding the circumstances that had led to Maya's decisions. The enemy ambush was coordinated and effective, trapping multiple friendly elements in overlapping fields of fire. Standard communication procedures had broken down under combat stress, and the ground teams were providing inaccurate position information that would have resulted in friendly fire incidents if air support had responded to those coordinates. Major Harrison interrupted with obvious skepticism. How could you possibly know that the position information was inaccurate? You were kilometers away from the actual engagement area. Sir, my elevated observation position provided direct line of sight to both friendly and enemy locations. I could see that the grid coordinates being transmitted by the assault teams placed them several hundred meters from their actual positions. Maya's response was factual and confident, reflecting the technical competence that had made her tactical coordination effective. But you had no authority to provide tactical coordination regardless of what you observed. Major Harrison's objection went to the heart of military hierarchy and the importance of following orders, even when individual judgment suggested alternative actions. No, sir, I had no formal authority. I made the decision to exceed my assigned parameters because I believed that following proper procedures would result in American casualties that could be prevented through immediate tactical coordination. The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and distant sounds of base operations. Colonel Thompson reviewed documents while considering the complex issues raised by Maya's case, the tension between institutional discipline and practical effectiveness that defined many military decisions. A new voice interrupted the proceedings as Captain Rodriguez entered with authorization from the hearing coordinator. Colonel Thompson, I have tactical analysis and supporting documentation that directly relates to Staff Sergeant Chen's actions during the chemical facility operation. Major Harrison objected immediately. Sir, this hearing is focused on disciplinary violations, not tactical review. Additional documentation about mission outcomes doesn't excuse deliberate insubordination. Captain Rodriguez, explain the relevance of your materials to the specific charges being addressed. Colonel Thompson's tone suggested willingness to consider broader context while maintaining focus on the legal issues at hand. Sir, the tactical analysis demonstrates that Staff Sergeant Chen's unauthorized coordination was not only effective but necessary given the failure of authorized procedures. The evidence shows systematic communication breakdowns and intelligence gaps that left battlefield commanders without critical information needed for mission success. Rodriguez spread detailed documentation across the hearing table, revealing technical analysis of radio traffic, tactical timelines, and battlefield coordination that painted a comprehensive picture of the operation. The materials demonstrated both the severity of the tactical crisis and the precision of Maya's response. Colonel Thompson studied the documents with obvious interest, while Major Harrison reviewed them with increasing concern about their implications for his prosecution. The evidence was detailed and professionally prepared, providing context that complicated the straightforward disciplinary narrative. Captain Rodriguez, this analysis suggests significant problems with operational planning and communication procedures. Are you testifying that proper channels were inadequate for the tactical situation encountered during the mission? Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm documenting. The communication systems failed under combat stress, intelligence estimates proved inaccurate, and standard coordination procedures couldn't adapt to the dynamic battlefield situation. Staff Sergeant Chen's intervention filled critical gaps that our institutional procedures couldn't address. Maya listened to Rodriguez's testimony with mixed emotions, grateful for the support but understanding that it highlighted systematic problems that extended beyond her individual case. The analysis painted a picture of institutional rigidity that had nearly resulted in mission failure and unnecessary casualties. Major Harrison stood to challenge Rodriguez's testimony. Captain Rodriguez, institutional procedures exist for valid reasons. They ensure coordination, prevent friendly fire incidents, and maintain command authority. Individual initiative that bypasses established protocols creates chaos and endangers lives. With respect, sir, the established protocols had already created chaos by failing to provide tactical coordination when it was most needed. Rodriguez's response was respectful but firm, based on documented evidence rather than theoretical arguments about military hierarchy. Staff Sergeant Chen's tactical coordination was precise, professional, and effective. Her radio work prevented friendly fire incidents and enabled successful completion of mission objectives that would have failed under standard procedures. Colonel Thompson leaned back in his chair, processing the competing arguments about military discipline versus tactical effectiveness. The case had evolved beyond simple insubordination to encompass broader questions about institutional adaptability and battlefield leadership. Staff Sergeant Chen, you're asking this hearing to consider whether mission success justifies violating direct orders. That's a dangerous precedent that could undermine military authority and discipline. Sir, I'm asking this hearing to consider whether rigid adherence to failed procedures serves military objectives, when those procedures prevent effective response to battlefield realities. Maya's response reflected months of thinking about the broader implications of her actions. The procedures exist to prevent exactly the kind of freelance operations that you conducted. Military discipline requires following orders, even when individual judgment suggests different actions. Major Harrison's argument represented traditional military thinking about the importance of hierarchical authority. And if following those orders results in unnecessary American casualties, Maya asked quietly, echoing the question that had driven her decision during the chemical facility operation. That's not your decision to make. Command authority exists for valid reasons, and individual soldiers cannot be allowed to substitute personal judgment for institutional procedures. Major Harrison's response was immediate and forceful, reflecting deep conviction about military discipline. Maya looked directly at Colonel Thompson. Sir, the assault teams would have suffered significant casualties if I had followed my assigned parameters. Air support would have struck friendly positions if I hadn't provided corrected coordinates. I chose to act because my technical capabilities and tactical observation could save American lives. The hearing room was completely quiet, as Colonel Thompson considered the fundamental issues raised by Maya's case. Military justice required balancing competing principles of discipline and effectiveness, individual initiative, and institutional authority. This hearing will recess for 2 hours while I review all evidence and testimony provided, Colonel Thompson announced finally. We will reconvene to hear my decision regarding the charges and any recommended disciplinary action. As the room emptied, Maya remained seated, processing the weight of testimony that had been presented and its potential impact on the hearing outcome. She had defended her actions honestly while acknowledging her violations of military procedure, but the decision was now beyond her influence. Captain Rodriguez approached as others filed out. Chen, regardless of how this hearing concludes, you demonstrated exceptional tactical competence under the most demanding circumstances. The military needs people who can think independently and act decisively when situations exceed standard procedures. Maya appreciated Rodriguez's support, but she understood that personal validation wouldn't necessarily influence the formal outcome of disciplinary proceedings. Military justice operated according to institutional requirements that sometimes conflicted with individual recognition or tactical effectiveness. The 2-hour waiting period felt interminable as Maya reflected on the events that had brought her to this moment. She had joined the military to serve objectives larger than personal advancement, to contribute technical skills and professional competence to missions that mattered for national security and soldier safety. Now that service was being evaluated within frameworks that emphasized procedural compliance over tactical results, institutional hierarchy over battlefield effectiveness. The tension between those competing values would determine not only her personal future but also precedents that might affect future military operations. Staff Sergeant Williams found Maya in the empty hearing room, staring at documents that would shape her military career. Chen, I've been talking to people who were involved in the chemical facility operation. The consensus is clear. Your tactical coordination made the difference between mission success and disaster. Maya looked up from her contemplation. That's gratifying, but it doesn't change the fact that I deliberately violated my assigned authority. Military discipline requires accountability for actions that exceed authorized parameters. Sometimes the right action isn't the authorized action. Williams settled beside Maya, her expression reflecting years of experience with military bureaucracy and its limitations. Military history includes many examples of people who had to choose between following orders and accomplishing the mission, and some of them faced court-martial proceedings for making that choice. Maya understood that positive outcomes didn't necessarily excuse procedural violations, especially in institutional contexts that prioritized predictability and control. Some did, others received recognition for courage and initiative. The difference often depends on the people making decisions and their willingness to balance competing institutional requirements. When the hearing reconvened, Colonel Thompson's expression remained unreadable as he took his position with deliberate formality. The documents were arranged with precise movements that suggested careful consideration of complex issues, and his demeanor indicated the weight of responsibility he felt for the decision. Staff Sergeant Chen, this hearing has presented difficult questions about military authority, battlefield initiative, and the balance between institutional discipline and tactical effectiveness. You have admitted to exceeding your assigned authority and conducting unauthorized tactical coordination during combat operations. Maya felt her stomach tighten as the formal language suggested that her military career was approaching its conclusion. The charges were serious, and military justice typically emphasized procedural compliance over individual judgment. However, Colonel Thompson continued, the evidence also demonstrates that your actions were taken in response to systematic failure of authorized procedures and imminent threat to American forces. Your technical competence and tactical judgment prevented casualties and enabled mission success when institutional protocols proved inadequate. The room was completely silent as Maya processed the unexpected direction of Thompson's comments. Major Harrison leaned forward with obvious surprise at the colonel's analysis, while Rodriguez maintained professional composure despite evident satisfaction with the proceedings. Military discipline requires following orders, but it also requires intelligent initiative when circumstances exceed the scope of standard procedures. The question before this hearing is whether your actions represent insubordination or adaptive leadership under extreme conditions. Maya held her breath, understanding that Thompson's next words would define her future and potentially establish precedents for similar situations involving battlefield initiative and emergency authority. After reviewing all evidence, including tactical analysis provided by Captain Rodriguez and mission reports from participating units, I find that your actions, while technically unauthorized, were necessary and appropriate given the tactical situation and the failure of institutional procedures. Relief flooded through Maya's chest, but Thompson wasn't finished with his analysis. However, the irregular nature of your tactical coordination cannot be ignored completely. You will receive formal counseling regarding proper channels for emergency coordination, but you will also receive commendation for exceptional performance under combat conditions. Major Harrison stood with obvious confusion about the mixed outcome. Sir, counseling and commendation seem contradictory for the same actions. Major Harrison, military service often involves contradictory requirements. Staff Sergeant Chen violated established procedures, but she also demonstrated exactly the kind of tactical competence and adaptive leadership that modern combat operations require. Thompson's response reflected careful consideration of competing institutional needs. The counseling acknowledges procedural violations, while the commendation recognizes tactical effectiveness and mission accomplishment. More importantly, this case highlights significant gaps in our operational procedures that need to be addressed systematically. Colonel Thompson turned back to Maya with final instructions that would reshape her military career. Staff Sergeant Chen, you will be transferred to a new assignment where your tactical capabilities can be properly utilized. You've proven competent to handle responsibilities that exceed passive observation and routine communication. Maya stood at attention, her voice steady despite the emotional impact of the decision. Thank you, sir. I accept both the counseling and the commendation. One additional matter, Thompson added. The communication failures and tactical coordination gaps identified during this operation have revealed serious deficiencies in our procedures for complex battlefield environments. You will be assigned to a special project team responsible for developing new protocols that address these institutional shortcomings. As the hearing concluded, Maya felt complex emotions that reflected both vindication and responsibility. Her actions had been recognized as necessary and effective, but she had also been entrusted with helping to solve the systematic problems that had made her unauthorized coordination required. The institutional framework had found a way to acknowledge her contribution while maintaining procedural authority, balancing individual initiative against organizational requirements in a manner that served both military discipline and operational effectiveness. Major Harrison approached as they left the hearing room, his expression neutral but professional. Staff Sergeant Chen, I disagreed with portions of the colonel's decision, but I respect his analysis of the competing factors involved. Your new assignment will carry significant responsibilities. Maya nodded respectfully. I understand, sir. I'll work to justify the confidence that's been placed in my capabilities. As she walked back toward her quarters, Maya reflected on the transformation that had occurred since the chemical facility operation. She had started as an underutilized observer, relegated to passive monitoring, while others made tactical decisions. Now she was being recognized as someone capable of providing battlefield leadership when circumstances demanded adaptive response. Staff Sergeant Williams intercepted her near the communication center. Chen, how do you feel about the outcome and the new assignment? Maya considered the question carefully while processing the implications of her changed status within the military hierarchy. I feel like the system found a way to balance institutional requirements against tactical realities. The counseling acknowledges that I violated procedures, while the commendation recognizes that those violations served mission objectives. You realize this changes everything about your military career. You're not going to be assigned to observation duties anymore. They're going to expect you to provide tactical leadership and develop institutional solutions to complex operational problems. The weight of that realization was both exciting and daunting. Maya had proven her capability for tactical coordination under extreme pressure, but she had also learned that such capabilities carried significant personal and professional risks. Captain Rodriguez found them discussing the hearing outcome and offered her own perspective on Maya's future role. Chen, the special project assignment is an opportunity to influence military doctrine and operational procedures in ways that will affect soldiers for years to come. Your experience with tactical coordination failures gives you unique insights into institutional gaps that need to be addressed. Maya understood that her unauthorized actions had become a case study in emergency leadership and adaptive response to battlefield conditions. The tactical coordination she had improvised during the chemical facility operation was now being analyzed as a potential model for future operational procedures. The precedent established by her case might influence how similar situations involving battlefield initiative and emergency authority would be handled, affecting military doctrine in ways that extended far beyond her personal circumstances. Over the following days, Maya began preparing for her new assignment while reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had proven that effective leadership sometimes required exceeding assigned authority when institutional procedures proved inadequate for tactical realities. Her voice had guided aircraft through combat conditions and coordinated successful mission completion when authorized channels had failed. Now that same voice would help develop the institutional frameworks needed to ensure that future operations could adapt effectively to unexpected battlefield conditions. The observer had become a coordinator, the unauthorized voice had become a recognized authority, and the quiet professional had demonstrated that true leadership often emerged from those willing to accept personal risk for mission accomplishment and soldier safety. Maya's story was becoming part of military doctrine, but more importantly, it was establishing precedents for the kind of adaptive leadership that modern combat operations increasingly required. The tactical procedures she had improvised during emergency conditions were being studied and formalized as standard protocols. The fog of institutional rigidity was lifting, replaced by recognition that effective military operations required both disciplinary structure and adaptive capability. Maya had proven that courage wasn't about having permission to act, but about having the competence and integrity to do what was necessary when everything else had failed. 8 months after the disciplinary hearing, Maya stood in the Advanced Tactical Coordination Center at Fort Braxton, surrounded by sophisticated equipment that represented the cutting edge of military communication technology. Multiple high-resolution displays showed real-time battlefield data from operations across 3 different theaters, while banks of servers processed coordination algorithms that had emerged directly from her experiences during the chemical facility engagement. The promotion to Sergeant First Class had come with her transfer to the Special Operations Tactical Development Unit, a newly created organization tasked with revolutionizing how the military coordinated complex multi-domain operations. Maya's unauthorized radio work had become the foundation for entirely new doctrinal approaches to battlefield communication and tactical coordination. Master Sergeant Rebecca Torres approached Maya's workstation carrying a folder marked with security classifications that indicated the highest levels of military planning. Chen, General Martinez wants to review the new coordination protocols with you personally. The field testing results have exceeded every performance metric we established. Maya looked up from the tactical integration software she had been developing, her screen displaying real-time coordination between ground forces, air assets, and naval elements operating in a simulated urban environment. The protocols she had designed allowed seamless information sharing and tactical coordination across traditional service boundaries. How did the joint exercise perform with the new emergency frequency procedures? Maya asked, knowing that the protocols had been tested under conditions that replicated the communication failures she had experienced during her unauthorized coordination. Flawlessly, the exercise controllers threw every possible communication challenge at the participating units, and the backup coordination systems maintained tactical connectivity throughout the entire scenario. Your multi-frequency approach gives commanders the redundancy they need for complex operations. The irony wasn't lost on Maya that the emergency procedures she had improvised while exceeding her authority were now being institutionalized as standard military doctrine. The tactical coordination techniques that had nearly ended her career were being taught at advanced military schools and implemented across all major combat commands. General Martinez's office reflected the authority and responsibility that came with commanding joint special operations across multiple theaters. The walls displayed commendations from successful missions and photographs with military and civilian leadership, but the general's attention was focused entirely on the protocols that Maya had developed. Sergeant First Class Chen, I've been following the implementation of your tactical coordination systems across our operational commands. The feedback from field commanders has been unanimous. These procedures are transforming how we conduct complex operations. Thank you, ma'am. The protocols emerged from identifying gaps in institutional procedures that became apparent during high-stress tactical situations. Maya's response reflected both pride in her work and understanding of the broader implications for military effectiveness. Your experience during the chemical facility operation highlighted systematic weaknesses that had been affecting our operations for years without being properly addressed. The coordination protocols you've developed don't just solve communication problems. They enable entirely new approaches to battlefield management. General Martinez pulled out classified documents that detailed upcoming operational requirements in regions where traditional coordination methods had proven inadequate. The military was facing increasingly complex scenarios that required the kind of adaptive coordination Maya had pioneered during her unauthorized intervention. I'm assigning you to lead a new joint task force that will implement these coordination protocols in active operational theaters. You'll be working directly with Special Operations commanders to refine the procedures under actual combat conditions. The scope of the responsibility was breathtaking. Maya had progressed from being dismissed as a support observer to being entrusted with developing tactical doctrine that would influence military operations worldwide. Her unauthorized voice had become the standard for emergency coordination procedures. Ma'am, I'm honored by your confidence in these protocols and my ability to implement them effectively. I accept the assignment. Excellent. You'll be reporting directly to my staff while maintaining operational coordination with field commanders. Your first deployment will be supporting operations in a region where communication challenges have been preventing effective multi-unit coordination. As Maya left the general's office, she reflected on the transformation that had occurred since her disciplinary hearing. The quiet observer who had been relegated to inadequate overwatch positions was now being asked to revolutionize military coordination doctrine based on techniques she had developed while exceeding her assigned authority. 3 months later, Maya found herself in a forward command post in a conflict zone, where her new coordination protocols were being tested under actual combat conditions. The facility buzzed with activity as multiple operations were conducted simultaneously, all coordinated through the procedures she had developed. Lieutenant Colonel James Parker, the senior field commander, approached her position as she monitored coordination traffic from 6 different operational elements. Chen, your coordination protocols just enabled us to complete a mission that would have been impossible under our previous procedures. Maya looked up from the tactical displays that showed successful completion of a complex urban operation involving ground assault teams, close air support, naval gunfire, and electronic warfare elements. What specific aspects proved most effective, sir? The multi-frequency backup systems prevented communication failures that have plagued similar operations in the past. More importantly, the coordination algorithms allowed real-time tactical adjustments that kept all elements synchronized, despite rapidly changing battlefield conditions. The operation had involved exactly the kind of complex coordination that had been impossible during Maya's unauthorized intervention at the chemical facility. But now those same coordination techniques were standard procedure, enabling mission success that had been unachievable through traditional communication methods. Maya's tactical innovations were being credited with mission successes across multiple theaters of operation. The procedures that had emerged from her violation of assigned authority were now preventing the kind of communication failures that had nearly resulted in disaster during her own unauthorized coordination. Captain Sarah Mitchell, a field intelligence officer, joined their conversation with reports from other operational commands implementing Maya's protocols. Ma'am, I've been monitoring feedback from units across all major theaters. The coordination improvements are being measured in both mission effectiveness and casualty reduction. The evidence was overwhelming. Maya's innovations were not only improving tactical coordination, but also saving lives through more effective battlefield management and communication. The unauthorized actions that had risked her military career were now contributing to soldier safety worldwide. 6 months into her deployment, Maya received notification that her work was being recognized at the highest levels of military leadership. The coordination protocols she had developed were being incorporated into joint doctrine and would be taught at all advanced military education institutions. The notification included assignment to the Pentagon's Joint Staff, where she would help develop future coordination doctrine and train senior officers in the implementation of advanced tactical communication systems. Her expertise had become essential for military planning at the strategic level. Master Sergeant Torres found Maya reviewing after-action reports from recent operations that had utilized her coordination protocols. Chen, there's something you need to see. These reports document mission success rates since your protocols were implemented. Maya studied the statistical analysis that Torres presented, showing dramatic improvements in mission completion rates, coordination effectiveness, and casualty reduction across all operational commands using her procedures. The data was compelling and comprehensive. Your unauthorized coordination during the chemical facility operation has now been credited with saving hundreds of lives through improved tactical procedures. The techniques you improvised under emergency conditions have become the foundation for modern military coordination doctrine. The weight of that realization was both humbling and gratifying. Maya had chosen to exceed her authority based on immediate tactical necessity, but that choice had influenced military operations in ways she had never imagined possible. As her deployment concluded and preparations began for her Pentagon assignment, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had started as an undervalued observer whose expertise was dismissed by institutional hierarchy that couldn't recognize capability beyond traditional role assignments. The chemical facility operation had forced her to choose between following inadequate procedures and acting on tactical knowledge that could save American lives. That choice had risked everything she had worked for during her military career, but it had also demonstrated competence that couldn't be ignored. The disciplinary hearing had balanced institutional requirements against tactical effectiveness, finding a way to acknowledge both her procedural violations and her mission contributions. The outcome had established precedents for emergency authority and adaptive leadership that influenced military doctrine. Staff Sergeant Williams visited Maya during her final week at the Forward Command Post, bringing news about her former unit and updates on personnel who had participated in the original chemical facility operation. Chen, you should know that your tactical coordination has become legendary among the units that were there that day. Maya appreciated the recognition, but she understood that individual validation was less important than the institutional changes that had emerged from her experience. The coordination failures that had nearly resulted in mission disaster were being systematically addressed through new procedures and training programs. The protocols you developed are being implemented by units that never heard of the chemical facility operation, but they're benefiting from the lessons you learned while exceeding your assigned authority. Your unauthorized voice has become the standard for emergency coordination procedures. Colonel Parker conducted Maya's final operational briefing before her transfer to the Pentagon assignment. The briefing covered mission statistics, procedural improvements, and the broader impact of her coordination innovations on military effectiveness across multiple theaters. Sergeant First Class Chen, your contributions to military coordination doctrine represent one of the most significant tactical innovations of the past decade. The procedures you developed have transformed how we conduct complex operations and coordinate multi-domain responses to evolving battlefield conditions. Maya felt pride in the recognition, but she also understood the responsibility that came with having influenced military doctrine at such a fundamental level. Her decisions during the chemical facility operation had established precedents that would affect how future generations of soldiers approached tactical coordination and emergency authority. The Pentagon assignment represented both recognition of her expertise and opportunity to influence strategic planning at the highest levels of military leadership. Her unauthorized coordination had evolved into institutional authority for developing future tactical doctrine. As Maya prepared to leave the Forward Command Post, she received a message from the assault team leader who had been saved by her unauthorized coordination during the chemical facility operation. The message was brief but powerful, expressing gratitude for her willingness to exceed assigned authority when American lives were at stake. The message reminded Maya that her choice to violate procedures had been driven by commitment to mission accomplishment and soldier safety rather than personal advancement or recognition. Those principles had guided her throughout the transformation, from dismissed observer to recognized tactical innovator. Standing in the communication center where her protocols coordinated operations across multiple theaters, Maya remembered the inadequate overwatch position where her military career had been transformed. She had been told to observe and avoid interference with tactical operations conducted by qualified personnel. But when the moment demanded it, she had found the courage to exceed her assigned limitations and provide coordination that saved lives and enabled mission success. That moment of decision had defined not only her personal future, but also institutional approaches to battlefield leadership and adaptive authority. The observer had become the coordinator, the unauthorized voice had become standard doctrine, and the quiet professional had demonstrated that true leadership often emerged from those willing to accept personal risk for mission accomplishment and the safety of fellow soldiers. Maya's story had become part of military education, taught at advanced schools as an example of how individual initiative and technical competence could identify and solve institutional problems that affected operational effectiveness. Her unauthorized coordination was now a case study in adaptive leadership and emergency authority. More importantly, the procedures she had developed were preventing the kind of communication failures that had nearly resulted in disaster during her own experience. Future operations would benefit from coordination capabilities that had emerged directly from her willingness to exceed assigned authority when circumstances demanded it. The fog of institutional rigidity had been replaced by recognition that effective military operations required both disciplinary structure and adaptive capability. Maya had proven that leadership wasn't about having permission to act, but about having the competence and integrity to do what was necessary when standard procedures failed. Her voice had guided aircraft through emergency conditions and coordinated successful mission completion when authorized channels proved inadequate. Now that voice was helping to develop institutional frameworks that would ensure future soldiers had the coordination tools and tactical support needed for success in the most challenging operational environments. The unauthorized coordination had become authorized doctrine, the exceptional performance had become standard procedure, and the quiet professional had become a recognized authority whose influence would shape military operations for decades to come. Maya had learned that the most important orders were sometimes the ones you gave yourself, and the most valuable authority was the trust earned through competence, courage, and unwavering commitment to mission accomplishment and soldier safety. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.